I didn't just leave him. I became the woman he never wanted me to be, and that's why he came back. My Apple Watch buzzed against my wrist. High heart rate notification. 122 BPM. You have been inactive for 10 minutes. Time to stand. I stared at the small glowing screen. I wasn't inactive. I was vibrating. I was standing in the center of a $2 million kitchen in Tribeca, wearing a backless emerald silk dress that cost more than my first car, frantically whisking a beurre blanc sauce that was 3 seconds away from separating. Elara, Richard's voice cut through the hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator and the jazz playlist I had carefully curated to sound effortless but expensive. In here? I called back, my voice tight. I checked my reflection in the polished surface of the oven. I looked manic. My eyes were wide, the pupils dilated from the double espresso I'd downed at 6:10 p.m. to power through the evening. Richard walked in. He was wearing his armor, a navy bespoke suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. The casual Friday billionaire look. He held a glass of scotch, the ice clinking softly as he swirled it. He looked me up and down, not with desire, with appraisal, like a real estate agent inspecting a property for cracks in the foundation. "The guests will be here in 15 minutes, he said, checking his vintage Patek Philippe. "Is the roast resting?" "Yes," I said, whisking harder. "It's resting. I'm just finishing the sauce." "You look flushed," he noted, taking a sip of his drink. "Did you use the primer I bought you, the green one? It cancels out redness." "I used it, Richard." "Well, maybe apply a bit more powder. You're shiny. We can't have you looking like you've been laboring. The whole point is that you're a natural hostess. Effortless, remember. Effortless. That was Richard's favorite word. Everything had to be effortless. My size 2 waistline. My 60-hour work week as the VP of marketing for a global fashion brand. The 4-course dinners I cooked from scratch because Richard didn't believe in catering. It's impersonal, Elara. It shows a lack of investment. He walked over to the counter and dipped a finger into my sauce. He tasted it. He frowned. "Needs more acid. It's flat." He turned and walked out of the kitchen. "Fix it, and fix your face. The Hamiltons are bringing their new partners. I need this merger to go through Elara. Don't be the variable that tanks it." He disappeared into the living room to adjust the dimmer switches for the 10th time. I stood there, the whisk trembling in my hand. Variable. I wasn't a wife. I was a variable in his equation of success, an asset to be optimized. I squeezed half a lemon into the sauce. I squeezed it so hard the rind broke. I took a deep breath. Inhale productivity, exhale weakness. That was the mantra. That was the hustle. I grabbed my phone to check my work email while the sauce reduced. 14 unread. Urgent Q3 campaign assets. Urgent supply chain delay in France. Urgent. You missed the 5 p.m. sync. I typed a reply with one hand while stirring with the other. My brain felt like a browser with too many tabs open. It was lagging. It was overheating. The doorbell rang. "Showtime, Elara," Richard called out. I threw the phone into a drawer. I grabbed a powder puff and dabbed my forehead aggressively. I plastered a smile on my face, the smile I had practiced in the mirror, the one that said, "I have it all and I love it." I walked out of the kitchen carrying a tray of canapés. I stepped onto the Persian rug, a Tabriz antique Richard had bought at auction for $40,000. "Do not wear shoes on the rug," he had told me. But tonight I was wearing Louboutins, stilettos, because he liked my legs to look long. I greeted the guests. "Welcome. So glad you could make it." The night was a blur of superficiality. We sat at the long dining table under the crystal chandelier. The conversation was a game of corporate tennis. Who acquired whom? Which stock was rallying? The nuances of the Fed's interest rate hike. I sat at the foot of the table, ensuring the wine glasses were never empty. I ate nothing. My stomach was a knot of acid and anxiety. "Elara, Richard tells me you're leading the rebranding for Velvet and Steel," Mr. Hamilton boomed, slicing into the duck breast I had spent 6 hours marinating. "Must be intense. Fast fashion is a cutthroat industry." "It is." I smiled, taking a sip of water. "But we thrive on pressure, don't we?" "Richard says you're a machine," Mrs. Hamilton chirped. She was a woman who looked like she subsisted on bone broth and judgment. "He says you answer emails at 3 a.m. I don't know how you do it. I need my 8 hours or I'm a monster." "Sleep is a luxury," Richard interjected smoothly, raising his glass. "Elara and I subscribe to the philosophy that you can sleep when you're dead, or when you retire, right, darling?" He looked at me. His eyes were cold, daring me to contradict him. "Right," I managed to say. "Who needs sleep when you have ambition?" The table chuckled. I felt a wave of dizziness. The room tilted slightly to the left. The chandelier seemed to swing. My ears started ringing, a high-pitched whine like a mosquito inside my skull. Bzzzt! My watch buzzed again. Heart rate 135 BPM. I put my hand to my forehead. It was clammy. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Hamilton asked, peering at me. "You look a bit pale." "I'm fine," I said, standing up. "I'll just clear the plates. Dessert is a soufflé. It can't wait." I picked up the plates. My hands were shaking violently now. The china rattled. Clink, clink, clink. Richard glared at me. "Stop it," his eyes said. "Control yourself." I stacked the plates. I turned to walk toward the kitchen, and then the dam broke. It wasn't a subtle drip. It was a gush. I felt a sudden warm wetness explode in my nasal cavity. Before I could bring my hand up, bright crimson blood poured out of my nose. It splashed onto the white tablecloth. It splashed onto my emerald dress, and as I gasped and stumbled, dropping the stack of plates, it splashed onto the $40,000 Persian rug. Crash. The sound of shattering china silenced the room, but the silence that followed was worse. I stood there, blood streaming down my face, dripping off my chin, looking at the carnage at my feet. The duck bones, the gravy, the blood. It looked like a crime scene. "Oh my God!" Mrs. Hamilton gasped. I looked at Richard. I waited for him to rush to me. I waited for him to grab a napkin to ask if I was dying to call a doctor. I waited for the husband I had married 5 years ago. Richard didn't move. He stared at the rug. He stared at the dark stains spreading across the intricate wool pattern. His jaw clenched. A vein throbbed in his temple. He looked up at me. There was no concern in his eyes, only disgust and fury. "You ruined the tabriz," he whispered. The room was silent enough that everyone heard it. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" He said, "You ruined the rug." "Richard," Mr. Hamilton said, standing up awkwardly, "I think she needs a doctor. That's a lot of blood." "She's fine." Richard snapped, his voice crisp and dismissive. He stood up and walked over to me, grabbing my arm. He didn't offer comfort. He steered me away from the guests like a misbehaving child. "It's just a nosebleed. She gets them when she gets hysterical." He pushed me toward the powder room. "Go clean yourself up, Alara, immediately. You look like a butcher." He shoved me inside the small bathroom and closed the door. I heard the lock click. I stood in front of the sink. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. Her skin was gray. Her eyes were hollow, rimmed with dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. Blood was smeared across her mouth and chin like war paint. Her chest was heaving. I turned on the tap. Cold water. I splashed my face. The water turned pink as it swirled down the drain. I grabbed a towel and pressed it to my nose. Pinched the bridge. Leaned forward. I knew the drill. This was the 3rd time this month. My body was screaming at me. It was waving red flags. "Stop! Please stop! We are dying." But I couldn't stop. The mortgage, the status, the expectations. I sat on the closed toilet lid, shaking. I could hear them outside. Richard was apologizing, not for his behavior, but for mine. "I'm so sorry about the interruption." His voice filtered through the door. "Alara has been difficult lately. She doesn't handle stress well. I think she's hitting the wall." "She looks exhausted, Richard," Mr. Hamilton said. "Maybe she needs a vacation." "A vacation?" Richard laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "She needs an upgrade. Honestly, looking at her tonight, she's depreciating. I might need to send her to a clinic for a refresh. Some Botox, maybe some stimulants. She's losing her edge, and I can't have a dull wife. It's bad for the brand." I stopped breathing. Depreciating. Refresh. Bad for the brand. He wasn't talking about a person. He was talking about a car, a laptop, an object that was no longer performing at peak efficiency. I looked at the blood-stained towel in my hand. I looked at the ring on my finger, a massive diamond that felt heavier than a shackle. I remembered the girl I used to be, Alara from Vermont, the girl who liked to read poetry in trees, the girl who wore linen dresses and smelled like lavender. Where did she go? She was buried under layers of foundation, caffeine, and corporate ambition. She was crushed under the weight of this penthouse. If I stayed here, I was going to die. Not metaphorically, literally. My heart was going to stop, or a vessel in my brain was going to burst, and Richard would be annoyed that I died before the fiscal year ended. I stood up. My nose had stopped bleeding. I looked at the door. I could open it. I could go back out there. I could apologize. I could finish the soufflé. I could be the good soldier. Or I looked at the small window above the toilet. It opened to the fire escape. We were on the penthouse floor, but the fire escape led down to the service terrace. I didn't think. If I thought, I would calculate the ROI of leaving. I would analyze the logistics. I just acted. I took off the Louboutins. I left them by the sink. I took off the diamond ring. I placed it next to the shoes. Payment for the rug, I thought. I climbed out the window. The night air hit me like a slap. It was cold, smelling of rain and city exhaust. I climbed down the metal stairs, my bare feet cold on the grate. I reached the service terrace. I took the service elevator down to the garage. I didn't have my purse. I didn't have my wallet, but I had my car keys in my pocket. I always kept them in my dress pocket, a habit from my anxiety needing to know I had an exit. I reached my car, a vintage Mercedes convertible, my one indulgence, my one connection to a softer past. I got in. I started the engine. My phone, the work phone, buzzed in the pocket of the dress. "Richard, what are you doing in there?" "The souffle is sinking. Come out now." I took the phone out. I looked at it. I opened the window. I dropped the phone onto the concrete floor of the garage. Then I backed the car up. I heard the crunch of glass and metal under my tire. I drove out of the garage. I turned onto the West Side Highway. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to drive until I couldn't see the skyline anymore. The drive was a blur of adrenaline and tears. I drove north, away from the city, away from the hustle. I drove until the skyscrapers turned into strip malls, and the strip malls turned into trees. The Hudson Valley. My gas light turned on. I pulled into a gas station in the middle of nowhere, a place called Beacon. I turned off the engine. Silence. Real silence. Not the hum of a refrigerator or the white noise of traffic. Just quiet. I looked down at myself. I was barefoot. I was wearing a ruined silk dress stained with blood. I had no money. I had no phone. I was shivering. I rested my head on the steering wheel and started to laugh. It was a hysterical, broken sound. I was the VP of marketing. I was a high-value asset, and here I was, a refugee in a gas station, fleeing a life that everyone else envied. I opened the glove box. I kept an emergency kit there, a flashlight, a granola bar, and an envelope of cash, $500. Just in case. I grabbed the cash. I filled the tank. I needed a place to sleep. I drove down the dark country road. I saw a sign. The Bramble Motor Inn. Vacancy. It looked like a set from a horror movie or a romance novel. I couldn't tell. I pulled in. The office was a small wooden shack. An old woman was behind the counter knitting. She looked up as I walked in, barefoot and bloodied. She didn't scream. She didn't call the police. She just looked at me over her spectacles. "Rough night?" she asked. "You have no idea," I whispered. "I have a cabin in the back. Private, quiet, has a tub. How much? $60 a night." I put $300 on the counter. 5 nights, I said, and I need a toothbrush and maybe, do you have any clothes, anything? I'll pay. The woman looked at my silk dress. Then she reached under the counter and pulled out a flannel shirt and a pair of sweatpants. "Lost and found," she said. "On the house. You look like you need something soft." Soft. The word made me want to weep. I had spent 10 years armoring myself in structure and steel, in polyester blends that didn't wrinkle. I had forgotten what soft felt like. "Thank you," I said. I took the key. I walked to the cabin. It was small, rustic. The floorboards creaked, but it smelled of pine and rain. I locked the door. I went into the bathroom. I stripped off the ruined dress. I threw it in the trash. I filled the tub. I stepped into the hot water. I scrubbed the blood off my face. I scrubbed the makeup off. I scrubbed the ambition off. I lay back in the water. I held up my wrist. My Apple Watch was still on. It lit up. Stand goal achieved. You have 54 missed calls. I took it off. I dropped it into the bathwater. It fizzled. The screen went black. I closed my eyes. I was alone. I was broke. I was possibly crazy. But for the first time in 5 years, my heart rate was under 80. I slept. The detox. The first 3 days were hell. It wasn't a peaceful retreat. It was withdrawal. I paced the small cabin like a caged tiger. My brain was screaming for dopamine. I reached for a phone that wasn't there. I checked a wrist that was bare. I should be working. I should be checking KPIs. I'm wasting time. Guilt ate me alive. I imagined Richard's fury. I imagined the office chaos. I imagined my career imploding. I tried to meditate, but my mind was a stock ticker of anxieties. I couldn't sleep past 5 a.m. My internal alarm was set to hustle. I cleaned the cabin 3 times. I reorganized the kitchenette. I was a machine that had been unplugged, but the gears were still spinning, grinding against each other. On the 4th morning, it rained, a heavy, relentless downpour that turned the world gray. I ran out of granola bars. I had to go out. I put on the oversized flannel shirt and the sweatpants. I looked like a homeless lumberjack. I got into my Mercedes. I drove into the small town of Beacon. I found a grocery store. A small local co-op. It smelled of earth and yeast. I bought apples, cheese, bread that looked like it was baked by a human, not a factory. As I was leaving, balancing the paper bag on my hip, I saw a flyer on the community board. Hudson Valley Book Barn and Nursery. Used books, rare plants, coffee, books and plants. 2 things that required patience. 2 things Richard hated. Books gather dust, Alara. Plants attract bugs. I got back in my car. I put the address in the GPS. The GPS took me down a dirt road, winding, muddy. The rain was coming down harder now. My Mercedes was built for the Autobahn, not for mud. I felt the tires slip. The car fishtailed. I overcorrected. The car slid sideways off the gravel and sank into a ditch filled with thick brown sludge. The engine revved. The wheel spun. I was stuck. No, no, no. I hit the steering wheel. This was it. The universe punishing me. I was a failure as a wife, a failure as an executive, and now I couldn't even drive to a bookstore without crashing. I burst into tears. I sat there in the mud, sobbing over the steering wheel, the rain hammering on the roof. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was knocking on my window. I jumped. I looked up. A man was standing there in the rain. He was wearing a yellow raincoat and muddy boots. He had a beard, not a hipster beard, but a real rugged beard. His hair was wet and plastered to his forehead. I rolled down the window an inch. "I'm stuck," I choked out. "I can see that," he said. His voice was deep resonant like a cello. He didn't sound annoyed. He sounded amused. "I don't have a oi," I said. "I don't have a phone." "Well, lucky for you, I have a truck and a winch," he said. "Sit tight." He walked back to an old Ford pickup truck parked behind me. He backed it up. He jumped out into the mud, not caring about the dirt. He hooked a chain to my bumper. He walked back to my window. "Okay," he said. "Put it in neutral. Don't gas it. Just steer." "But I need to accelerate to get out," I argued. That was my instinct. Push harder. Force it. He looked at me. His eyes were the color of warm amber. "No," he said gently. "If you gas it, you'll just dig yourself deeper. The mud is too thick. You have to surrender to the pull." "Surrender? Just let go of the gas, darling. Let me do the work. Trust the chain." I looked at his feet sinking in the mud. I looked at his calm face. Richard would be screaming at me right now. He would be calling me an idiot. He would be worried about the mud on the paint job. This man just wanted to help. "Okay," I whispered. I took my foot off the pedal. I put the car in neutral. He gave me a thumbs up. The truck roared. The chain went taut. Slowly, smoothly, my car slid out of the ditch and back onto the road. He unhooked the chain. He walked back to my window. "You okay?" he asked. I think so, thank you." "I'm Noah," he said, extending a muddy hand. I hesitated. My hands were clean, manicured. Then I reached out and shook it. "I'm Alara." "Nice to meet you, Alara. You're a long way from the city." He nodded at my license plate. "I ran away," I blurted out. I don't know why. Maybe because he looked like a confessional booth with legs. He smiled. It wasn't a mocking smile. It was a knowing one. "Best thing you could do," he said. "City eats people alive." "I was looking for the book barn," I said. "Well, you found it." He pointed down the road. "I'm the owner. I was just heading in to open up." "You're the owner." "Yep, books and plants. Follow me. I'll make you a coffee. On the house. You look like you need something warm." I looked at him. He wasn't judging my flannel shirt. He wasn't assessing my net worth. He was just kind. "Okay," I said. I followed his truck down the lane. I drove slowly. "Let go of the gas," he had said. "Don't dig yourself deeper." It was the first piece of advice I had received in 10 years that actually made sense. I parked in front of a sprawling red barn covered in ivy. Smoke was curling from the chimney. I turned off the engine. The rain stopped. A ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, hitting the wet grass, making it sparkle like emeralds. I took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like fear anymore. It smelled like pages turning. It smelled like wet earth. It smelled like a beginning. The book barn smelled of vanilla curing tobacco and the disintegration of old paper, a scent the Japanese call bibliosmia. It was a smell that belonged to a different century, a time before Kindles and quarterly earnings reports. I sat in a worn leather armchair that had clearly been shaped by decades of reading. In my hands was a mug of coffee, not a paper cup with a cardboard sleeve, a ceramic mug heavy and chipped, glazed a deep forest green. Noah was behind the counter sorting a stack of first editions. He moved with a deliberate slowness that made my skin itch. In my old life, speed was currency. If you weren't moving fast, you were dying. But Noah moved like a river, steady, unhurried, inevitable. "You're vibrating again," he said without looking up. I set the mug down on the side table. "I'm not. The coffee in your cup is making ripples like the T-Rex is coming in Jurassic Park." He pointed out a small smile playing on his lips. "What's the matter? The Wi-Fi is down." "I don't have a phone, remember," I said, tucking a strand of unwashed hair behind my ear. "I'm just useless. I've been sitting here for 2 hours. I haven't done anything. I haven't produced anything." Noah stopped sorting. He leaned his elbows on the counter. "Alara, you're not a factory. You don't have to produce. You just have to be." "That sounds like a greeting card," I snapped. The cortisols were spiking again. The withdrawal from the hustle was physical. My chest felt tight. "I can't just be. I need to be useful. Let me organize the shelves. Your nonfiction section is a mess. It's not alphabetized. It's not even sorted by Dewey Decimal." "It's sorted by feeling," Noah said. "Feeling." I stood up. "How is a customer supposed to find a biography of Churchill if it's next to a cookbook?" "Maybe they aren't looking for Churchill," Noah said, walking around the counter. He came toward me. He was wearing a flannel shirt today, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms dusted with soil. "Maybe they're looking for something heavy to ground them, or maybe they find the cookbook and decide to make a roast instead of reading about war. That's serendipity." He stopped in front of me. He smelled of rain and sawdust. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "To the nursery. You need to get your hands dirty. It's the only way to get the static out of your head." I followed him out the back door. The nursery wasn't a sterile greenhouse. It was a jungle, rows and rows of plants, ferns, succulents, fruit trees stretching out under a canopy of translucent panels. It was humid and green and alive. Noah stopped at a potting bench. There was a pile of dark, rich soil and a stack of terracotta pots. "I need to repot these hydrangeas," he said. "They've outgrown their containers. If they stay in the small pots, their roots will choke. They'll stop blooming." He handed me a trowel. "You do it." I looked at the dirt. I looked at my hands. My manicure was chipped, the gel polish peeling off. "I don't know how," I said. "It's easy," he demonstrated on one. He turned the pot upside down, tapped the bottom, and slid the plant out. The roots were a tangled white mass circling endlessly in the shape of the pot. "See, root-bound. They kept growing, but they had nowhere to go, so they started strangling themselves." I stared at the roots. Root-bound, that was me. I had been growing, achieving climbing, but I was trapped in a container that was too small for my soul. The penthouse, the job, Richard's expectations. I was strangling myself. "Loosen them up," Noah said gently, teasing the roots apart with his thick fingers. "You have to break the pattern before you can plant them in the new soil. It hurts a little, but it's necessary." I picked up a plant. I pulled it out of the plastic pot. I dug my fingers into the root ball. The soil was cool and damp. It felt real. I tore at the roots. I broke the circle. I placed it in a larger clay pot. I scooped fresh soil around it. I packed it down. "Good," Noah said softly. We worked in silence for an hour, repotting, watering. My rhythm changed. My breathing slowed to match the task. Scoop, plant, pat. I wasn't thinking about Q3 projections. I wasn't thinking about Richard's dinner parties. I was thinking about the dirt under my fingernails. When we finished, I wiped my forehead with the back of my hand, leaving a streak of mud. "I look like a mess," I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "You look human," Noah said. He reached out and brushed the dirt off my cheek with his thumb. His skin was rough, calloused. The touch sent a jolt of electricity down my spine that was stronger than any espresso. He held my gaze. His eyes were the color of moss. "You know," he said, "you don't have to go back. To the cabin. To the city. To him." I looked down at the hydrangeas. They looked happy in their new, spacious homes. "I have a life there, Noah. I have a mortgage. I have a contract." "You have a cage," he corrected. "And the door is open. You just have to decide if you want to fly or if you want to stay on the perch." The next week was a metamorphosis. I stopped wearing the sweatpants I borrowed from the motel. I went to a thrift store in Beacon. I bought vintage linen dresses, oversized cardigans, leather sandals, clothes that breathed, clothes that didn't require Spanx. I stopped setting an alarm. I woke up when the sun hit my pillow. I stopped drinking coffee on an empty stomach. I made oatmeal with cinnamon and apples. I was shedding my old skin. The corporate bitch was dying, and something soft or something raw was emerging. But the ghost of my old life still haunted me. I needed to know what was happening. I needed to secure my exit. On Tuesday, I drove to the public library in Beacon. I logged onto a computer terminal. I hesitated before typing Richard Sterling into Google. I pressed enter. The search results flooded the screen. Page 6. Where is Alara Sterling fashion exec missing after gala meltdown?
Dintum. Singbom.
Business Insider. Velvet and steel stock dips amidst leadership vacuum. Instagram @Richard Sterling. I clicked on his profile. It was public. He had posted a photo yesterday. It was a picture of him at a charity polo match. He was smiling, holding a glass of champagne. But he looked tired. His tie was slightly crooked. The caption read, "Solo this weekend. Alara is taking a much-needed wellness retreat in the Swiss Alps. Sending love to my better half." Swiss Alps. I snorted. He was spinning the narrative. He couldn't admit his wife had run away in a 1990 Mercedes. He had to make it sound expensive, exclusive. I logged into my bank account. Joint account frozen. Of course, he had locked me out. But then I logged into my brokerage account, the one Richard didn't control, the one that held my stock options from Velvet and Steel. They had vested last month. I looked at the value, $1.2 million. The stock was high, but the news of my disappearance was causing a wobble. If I sold now, I would be rich, independent. If I waited, Richard might find a way to freeze this too. Or he might tank the company reputation enough to devalue the stock. My finger hovered over the sell all button. This was it, the point of no return. If I sold, I was burning the bridge. I was declaring war. I remembered the nosebleed. I remembered him saying I needed to be refurbished. I remembered the mud in the ditch and Noah telling me to let go of the gas. Click. Order executed. Funds transferring to... I typed in a new account number, an offshore account I had opened years ago for consulting fees that Richard knew nothing about. Done. I was a millionaire and I was homeless. I logged out. I wiped the browser history. I walked out of the library. The sun was shining. The air tasted sweet. I bought an ice cream cone. Pistachio. I sat on a bench and ate it, watching the Hudson River flow south toward the city I would never return to. That evening, I didn't go back to the motel immediately. I drove to the book barn. The sign on the door said closed, but the lights were on. I knocked. Noah opened the door. He was holding a glass of wine. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said. "I sold them," I said, standing on the porch. "My stocks, my shares, everything. And I'm rich," I said, "and I'm terrified. Come in." He stepped aside. He poured me a glass of wine, a rich dark red. We sat on the back porch overlooking the nursery. The fireflies were starting to blink in the twilight. "Why are you terrified?" Noah asked. "Because I don't know who I am without the hustle," I admitted. "For 10 years, my value was my productivity. It was my title. It was my dress size. Now, I'm just Alara, and I'm afraid Alara isn't enough." Noah set his glass down. He turned to me. The twilight cast shadows across his rugged face. "Alara," he said, his voice low and serious. "Do you see that oak tree over there?" He pointed to a massive ancient oak at the edge of the property. "That tree doesn't do anything. It doesn't make money. It doesn't write emails. It just stands there. It drinks water. It grows leaves. It shelters birds. Is it valuable?" "Yes," I said. "It's beautiful." "Exactly. It's valuable because it exists, because it is strong and rooted and real. That's you. You've been trying to be a machine, but you're a tree. You just need to let your roots go down." I looked at him. Tears pricked my eyes, not tears of sadness, but of recognition. "I think I'm falling in love with this place," I whispered. "Just the place?" he asked. The air between us grew heavy, charged with a static electricity that had nothing to do with storms. He reached out and took my hand. His thumb traced the line of my palm. "You have a lifeline that goes on forever," he murmured. "A second life." I leaned in. I couldn't help it. He leaned in. Our lips met. It wasn't a devouring, desperate kiss like Richard used to give me, kisses that felt like he was consuming me. This was soft, gentle, slow. It tasted of wine and patience. It was a question, not a demand. I pulled back, breathless. Shh. He put a finger to my lips. "No need to analyze it. Just let it be." He stood up. "I'm making dinner. Pasta, from scratch. You want to help?" "I'd love to." We cooked together in his small kitchen behind the bookstore. I chopped garlic. He boiled water. There was no rush, no timer, no guests to impress. We ate on the porch, listening to the crickets. It was the best meal I had ever tasted. "Stay," he said as I started to clean up. "Stay here tonight. The guest room is made up." "I shouldn't," I said. "My things are at the motel." "Your things are things," he said. "You are here." I stayed. I slept in the guest room under a quilt that smelled of lavender. I slept for 10 hours. The intruder. 3 days later, the bubble burst. I was at the book barn helping Noah catalog a new shipment of rare botany books. I was wearing a yellow linen sundress I had found at the thrift store. My hair was loose wavy from the humidity. I wasn't wearing makeup. I felt beautiful. A bell chimed at the front door. "Customer?" I called out to Noah, who was in the back. I walked to the front. "Hi there, welcome to—" I froze. The words died in my throat. Standing in the doorway blocking the sunlight was a man. He was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford suit that looked ridiculous in this rustic setting. He was wearing sunglasses. He looked like a sleek, dangerous shark that had somehow swum into a freshwater pond. Richard. He took off his sunglasses. His eyes scanned the room with a sneer of disgust. He looked at the dust motes. He looked at the old books. Then he looked at me. He stared. He took in the linen dress, the bare feet I had kicked off my sandals, the lack of makeup. His lip curled. "My God," he said, "you look like a peasant." My heart started to hammer. The old conditioning kicked in. Stand up straight. Suck in your stomach. Smile. But then I remembered the roots. I remembered the oak tree. I didn't straighten. I leaned against the counter. "Hello, Richard," I said. My voice was calm. "I found the car," he said, walking toward me. "The GPS on the Mercedes. I forgot to disable it. Sloppy, Alara. Very sloppy." "I wanted you to find the car," I said. "I left the keys in the ignition." "And the phone." "Throwing it in the garage, childish." He reached the counter. He placed his manicured hands on the wood. "You've had your fun. You've had your little breakdown. It's time to come home. The Hamiltons are asking questions. I have a gala on Saturday. You need to get back and get to the salon and fix to whatever this is." He waved a hand at my face. "I'm not coming back, Richard," I said. He laughed. "Don't be ridiculous. Look at you. You're living in a barn. You're wearing a sack. You look fat." I wasn't fat. I was healthy. I had gained 5 pounds because I was actually eating. "I look happy," I corrected. "Happiness doesn't pay the bills," he snapped. "I cut off your cards. How are you surviving blowing guys for sandwiches?" "Hey!" A voice boomed from the back of the store. Noah walked out. He looked massive. He was holding a hammer. He had been fixing a shelf. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a t-shirt that clung to his chest. He didn't look like a banker. He looked like a bear. Richard turned. He looked Noah up and down, dismissing him instantly. "The hired help," Richard sneered. "Tell your employee to leave Ilara. We are having a private conversation." "I'm not an employee," Noah said, walking around the counter to stand next to me. He didn't touch me. He just occupied the space. A wall of protection. "And this is my store. You're trespassing." "I'm her husband," Richard spat. "I own her." "You don't own people," Noah said calmly. "Only things." Richard turned back to me, ignoring Noah. He reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was painful. "We are leaving. Now. I have the car outside." "Let go of me," I said. "Alara, stop this drama. You're coming home. You're sick. You need treatment." He pulled me. "Let go." Noah's voice dropped. It was a growl. He stepped forward. He put his hand over Richard's hand on my wrist. Noah didn't squeeze. He just applied pressure. Richard winced. He tried to pull away, but Noah was stronger, much stronger. Manual labor strong. Richard released me. He stumbled back, rubbing his wrist. "You assaulted me!" he screeched. "I'll sue you. I'll buy this shack and burn it to the ground." "Try it!" Noah crossed his arms. I rubbed my wrist. There would be a bruise. I looked at Richard, really looked at him. He looked small. He looked miserable. He was a hamster running on a wheel, screaming at the world to spin faster. I walked out from behind the counter. I reached into the pocket of my linen dress. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I was going to mail this," I said, "but since you're here," I handed it to him. He opened it. "Divorce papers." He laughed. "You can't divorce me. I have the best lawyers in New York. You'll get nothing. I'll bury you in litigation. You'll be destitute." "Read the second page," I said. He flipped the page. He read. His face went pale. "I sold my stock," I said. "My options, velvet and steel. I sold them on Tuesday, at the peak." You sold," he choked. "That was our retirement. That was my leverage for the board seat. That was my compensation package," I corrected. "It was in my name, and since we don't have a prenup because you thought I brought nothing to the table, I kept it all. $1.2 million. Cash, sitting in an account you can't touch." "You bitch," he whispered. "You ungrateful, lazy bitch." And, I continued, "I also withdrew half of the joint savings account, $500,000, just to be fair." Richard looked like he was having the stroke I almost had 3 weeks ago. "I will destroy you," he hissed. "You'll never work in this town again." "I don't want to work in that town, Richard." I smiled. It was the soft life smile, calm, serene, unbothered. "I retired. I'm 32 and I'm retired. I'm going to grow flowers and read books and eat bread." "You're wasting your potential," he screamed. "You were a VP. You were somebody. I was a battery," I said, "and you drained me. Now get out of my store." "It's not your store." "It will be," I said, glancing at Noah. "I'm thinking of becoming an investor." Richard looked from me to Noah. He saw the bond. He saw the strength. He saw that his money and his suits and his threats had no power here. The Hudson Valley didn't care about his Patek Philippe. He crumpled the papers in his fist. "Fine," he spat. "Rot here. Get fat, get old. When you're bored out of your mind in 6 months, don't come crawling back." He turned and stormed out. We watched him get into his Porsche. He revved the engine aggressively, spinning the tires on the gravel, spraying dirt everywhere. He sped off. Silence returned to the book barn. The dust motes danced in the sunlight. I let out a breath I had been holding for 5 years. My knees went weak. Noah caught me. He pulled me into his chest. He felt solid. "You okay?" he asked into my hair. "I'm shaking," I admitted. "Adrenaline dump," he said. "It'll pass." "He called me lazy," I whispered. Noah pulled back. He looked at my face. He tucked a stray hair behind my ear. "You're not lazy, Alara. You just stopped running a race you didn't want to enter." He kissed my forehead. "Come on. I think we need to close the shop early today." "Why?" "Because," he smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners, "it's a beautiful day. And I know a hidden swimming hole about a mile hike from here, and I think you need to wash the city off you one last time." I smiled. A swimming hole. A hike. A Tuesday afternoon with no emails. "Let's go," I said. I walked to the door. I flipped the sign. Closed. I locked the door, and for the first time in my life, I didn't worry about what I was missing. I only cared about what I had found. I took Noah's hand. We walked into the woods. The hustle was over. The soft life had begun. End of chapter 2. Note, I combined the climax with Richard and the resolution into this chapter to give a complete arc. The story of Alara is finished. Write chapter 3, with a length of 3,000 words following the rules. Autumn in the Hudson Valley is not a season. It is a performance. The maples turn a violent burning red, the oaks shift to russet, and the air becomes crisp enough to snap in your fingers. 6 months ago, I would have missed it. I would have been in a windowless conference room looking at Q4 spreadsheets, worrying about the fall collection color palette instead of looking at the actual trees. But today, I was standing on a ladder in the apple orchard behind the book barn, reaching for a particularly perfect Honeycrisp. My hands were rougher now. My nails were short, unpolished, and stained with blackberry juice. I wore a thick wool sweater that smelled of wood smoke, and my hair was braided back to keep it out of the cider press. "Heads up," Noah called from below. I dropped the apple. He caught it in the woven basket with practiced ease. "That's the last of them," I said, climbing down. The ladder creaked, a comforting, familiar sound. I landed on the grass. Noah was there, steady as always. He handed me a thermos. "Cider. Hot or cold?" "Hot, with a cinnamon stick." I took a sip. It was sweet tart and warmed me all the way to my toes. "We have enough for 300 gallons. I calculated, my old brain still liking the math. "If we bottle it and sell it at the Harvest Festival next week, coupled with the rare book sale—" "Alara," Noah interrupted gently, "stop optimizing the apples." I laughed. "Old habits. I was just thinking about margins." "Think about the pie," he corrected. "We're making pie tonight." We walked back toward the barn. The structure had changed in the last few months. It wasn't just a dusty bookstore anymore. I had invested. Not with a flashy glass renovation, but with care. We had fixed the roof. We had installed a wood-burning stove in the center of the shop, and we had cleared out the back storage room to create the Greenhouse Cafe. It was my project, my baby. A place where you could buy a first edition of Hemingway, a potted fern, and a slice of sourdough toast with homemade ricotta all in one transaction. It was the soft life manifested in brick and mortar, and it was booming. Not tech IPO booming, but lines out the door on Saturday morning booming. We walked into the shop. The bell chimed. It was Tuesday, so we were closed to the public. But there was a car parked in the gravel lot. A sleek black Audi sedan. I froze. My stomach gave a little lurch, a phantom reflex from my past life. "Who is that?" I asked. Noah looked out the window. "I don't know, but they're blocking the delivery bay." A woman stepped out of the car. She was wearing a beige trench coat, oversized sunglasses, and holding a leather portfolio. She looked like she belonged on Madison Avenue, not a dirt road. She walked up to the porch. She lowered her sunglasses. It was Sarah, my old assistant from Velvet and Steel. "Elara," she called out, squinting at me. She looked shocked, probably because I was wearing oversized overalls and holding a basket of apples. "Sarah." I walked forward. "What are you doing here?" I had to see it," she said, walking up the steps, her heels clicking precariously on the wood. "The rumors. Everyone in the office is talking about it. They said you joined a cult, or had a breakdown and moved to a commune." "Not a cult." I smiled, opening the door. "Just a bookstore. Come in." Sarah walked into the barn. She looked around, her nose wrinkling slightly at the smell of old paper, but then her eyes widened as she took in the warmth of the space. The fire crackling in the stove, the comfortable armchairs, the wall of greenery I had installed near the cafe counter. "This is—" She paused. "Cozy. That's the point," I said. "Sarah, this is Noah, my partner." Noah nodded, wiping his hand on his jeans before shaking hers. "Nice to meet you." "Partner?" Sarah whispered to me as Noah went to get more coffee. "Like, business partner, or—" "Both," I said. We sat by the fire. Sarah accepted a mug of cider cautiously, as if afraid it might contain unpasteurized germs. "So," she said, opening her portfolio, "I didn't just come for a visit. I came with a message. From corporate." I stiffened. "I don't work for them anymore, Sarah. I resigned." "I know, but—" "Richard." The name hung in the air like smoke. "What about him?" I asked, my voice steady. "He was fired," Sarah said. I blinked. "What?" "Last week. The merger with the Hamilton Group fell through. Apparently the partners thought he was too volatile. After the gala, when you left, he sort of spiraled. He missed meetings. He showed up to the office looking disheveled. He started screaming at interns." Sarah leaned in. "He blamed you, Elara, publicly. He told the board that you sabotaged him, that you stole his money and ran away to start a witchcraft shop." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Witchcraft?" "He's suing," Sarah said. "Or he's trying to. He's trying to sue Velvet and Steel for wrongful termination, claiming emotional distress caused by his wife's abandonment. And he's trying to subpoena you as a witness to his suffering." I looked at the fire. The flames danced, consuming the oak logs. Richard was drowning. And in true Richard fashion, he was trying to drag everyone down with him. "He can try," I said calmly. "But my divorce lawyer is a shark from Manhattan who eats men like Richard for breakfast. The divorce was finalized yesterday, Sarah. The papers are signed. I'm free." Sarah looked at me with a mixture of awe and confusion. "But don't you miss it?" She gestured to my wool sweater. "The power. The Access Fashion Week is next month. You used to live for Fashion Week." "I used to live for the adrenaline," I corrected. "I used to think that stress was the same thing as importance. If I wasn't stressed, I didn't matter." I looked over at Noah, who was arranging pumpkins in the window display. He was whistling. "Now," I said, "I know that peace is the ultimate power. Richard has a penthouse and a lawsuit. I have an orchard and a man who knows how to build a fire. I think I won." Sarah closed her portfolio. She looked down at her hands. "I'm on antidepressants," she whispered suddenly, "and beta blockers. I had a panic attack in the supply closet on Tuesday." I reached out and took her hand. Her skin was cold. Her pulse was racing. "Quit," I said. "I can't. I have student loans. I have rent." "Quit," I repeated, "and come work for me." "What? I need a manager for the cafe, someone organized, someone who knows how to run a P&L but wants to breathe fresh air. I can't pay you a Manhattan salary, but I can offer you a cottage down the road, free produce, and a guarantee that I will never, ever email you after 5 p.m. Sarah stared at me. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. We're launching the online store next month. The Slow Living Collection. Curated books, seeds, local honey. I need help." Sarah looked around the barn. She looked at the rain starting to tap against the windows. She looked at the piece. "I have to give 2 weeks' notice," she said, her voice trembling. "Give them today," I smiled, "and bring your boots." The final thread. A week later, the final thread of my old life was cut. It came in the form of a FedEx envelope delivered to the barn. The return address, Sterling and Associates Attorneys at Law, Richard's lawyer. I took the envelope to the back porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised purples and golds. I opened it. It was a settlement check. The remainder of the joint assets. He had fought for the apartment, the furniture, the art. I let him have it. I didn't want the rug I had bled on. I didn't want the bed where I had laid awake for 5 years worrying about wrinkles. I wanted the cash. And here it was, $450,000. It wasn't millions, but combined with my own stock sale, it was freedom. There was a letter included, handwritten, from Richard. I hesitated. Did I want to read it? Curiosity won. Alara, you win. I hope you're happy in your mud hut. You walked away from a dynasty. You walked away from a legacy. I will rebuild. I always do. And when I'm on the cover of Fortune again and you're selling jams to tourists, remember that you chose mediocrity. I read it twice. Mediocrity. To him, a quiet life was a failed life. To him, silence was emptiness. He would never understand. He would spend the rest of his life chasing a horizon that kept moving, hungry for a validation that would never fill him. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of pity. I didn't hate him anymore. I just felt sorry for him. He was still running the race. I had stepped off the track. I took the letter. I walked to the fire pit in the backyard where Noah was burning fallen leaves. "What's that?" Noah asked, leaning on his rake. "A receipt," I said. "For a life I returned." I tossed the letter into the fire. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. The words Fortune and Dynasty disappeared in a puff of gray smoke. I kept the check, though. I wasn't stupid. "I'm going to buy the land next door," I told Noah. "The Miller property. Yes, it has a barn. I want to start hosting retreats. The art of doing nothing. Weekend workshops for burnt-out executives. Yoga. Gardening. Silence. No phones allowed." Noah grinned. He pulled me into a hug, smelling of smoke and autumn. "You're going to monetize the soft life, aren't you?" "I'm going to teach them how to save themselves," I said, burying my face in his neck. "And yes, I'm going to charge a premium for it." The winter solstice. Winter came to the valley. The world turned white and silent. The orchard was bare, the branches like black ink strokes against the snow. The book barn was warm. The wood stove roared all day. It was the night of the winter solstice party. We had invited the town. Mrs. Gable from the bakery, the mailman, Sarah, who had moved into the cottage and looked 10 years younger, her cheeks pink with health. The barn was lit by hundreds of candles. We had moved the bookshelves to create a dance floor. A local bluegrass band was playing in the corner. The air smelled of mulled wine, pine needles, and joy. I was wearing a velvet dress, not emerald green, deep burgundy. It was loose, comfortable, and vintage. I wore flat boots. I carried a tray of mince pies through the crowd. "Elara." It was Sarah. She was holding a glass of wine, laughing with the local sheriff. "The online store sold out of the winter reading box in an hour," she shouted over the fiddle music. "Amazing," I beamed. "We'll pack them tomorrow." "No," Sarah shook her finger at me. "Tomorrow is Sunday. We rest on Sundays. We pack on Monday." I laughed. "Right, you're learning." I felt a hand on my waist. Not a check, a caress. I turned. Noah. He looked handsome in a clean white shirt and a tweed vest. He looked like he belonged in a storybook.
"May I have this dance?" he asked. "I don't know," I teased. "My hourly rate is pretty high." "I can pay in firewood and back rubs," he offered. "Sold." He pulled me onto the floor. We danced. Not a rigid waltz. A slow, swaying shuffle. I rested my head on his chest. I looked around the room. This wasn't a networking event. There were no business cards being exchanged. No one was scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. People were just talking, laughing, being. I thought about the penthouse, the white carpet, the fear of spilling wine, the fear of not being enough. Here, if I spilled wine, we would wipe it up and pour another glass. Here I was enough just by existing. "What are you thinking about?" Noah asked softly. "I'm thinking about success," I said. "And I used to think success was a vertical line," I said. "Up and to the right. Always climbing. Always higher. And now I think it's a circle." I looked at the wreath of evergreen branches hanging above the door. It's about completion, wholeness, returning to yourself. Noah stopped dancing. The music faded into the background. He reached into his pocket. My heart stuttered. Was he? He pulled out a small wrapped package, brown paper, twine. "It's not a ring," he whispered, seeing my expression. "I know we said no pressure. It's a solstice gift." I took it. I unwrapped the paper. It was a book, a small leather-bound journal, handmade. The paper was thick and textured. On the cover, embossed in gold leaf, were 2 words, the manifesto. "You're always writing lists," Noah said. "Inventory lists, to-do lists. I thought maybe you should write something else. Write the story.
Write the philosophy, how to live softly in a hard world. I think people need to read it. I ran my hand over the leather. A book. My book. Thank you, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. Merry Solstice Alara. He kissed me, and in that kiss I felt the final click of the lock. Not a lock engaging to keep me in, but a lock opening, setting me free. Epilogue. Spring. 3 months later. I sat on the porch of the book barn, the morning sun warming my face. The crocuses were pushing through the snowmelt. I held a bound manuscript in my hands. The Soft Life Manifesto, A Guide to Quitting the Hustle and Finding Your Soul, by Alara Vance. It was already a bestseller on pre-order. My publisher, a small independent press in Vermont, said it was the zeitgeist book of the decade. A car pulled up the drive. It wasn't a black Audi. It was a delivery truck. More books, more plants. I stood up. I walked into the shop. Sarah was behind the counter managing a team of 2 teenagers packing boxes. Noah was in the cafe pulling espresso shots. He looked up and smiled. Coffee. Herbal tea, I said. I'm cutting back on caffeine. Coming right up. I walked to the window. I looked at the reflection in the glass. The woman looking back wasn't the VP of marketing. She wasn't the trophy wife. She was a gardener, a writer, a partner. She was soft, but she was unbreakable. I took a sip of tea. I watched the birds building a nest in the eaves of the porch. They didn't hurry. They didn't stress. They just built twig by twig, trusting that spring would come. And it had. I opened my notebook to a fresh page. I picked up my pen, and I began to write the next chapter. If Alara's journey touched something inside you, subscribe for more stories about women who rise, rebuild, and reclaim their lives. And let me know in the comments which part of her transformation spoke to you the most.